The Dji Avata is finally here, and I'm going to tell you if you should buy this drone, if I will buy this drone, and if it changes the FPV landscape from here on out. To compile these thoughts, I went through every single review video, looked through all the test footage, looked through everything people said, and there's like 4 main criteria I have when it comes to picking a drone for cinematic FPV. And with that in mind, I'll let you know who should actually buy this drone. For some context, I'm an FPV pilot slash filmmaker who flies the standard bind and fly drones with the air unit and the goggles, and that is really the gold standard of capturing cinematic FPV to this date. Also, full disclosure, I haven't been sent anything prior to release, and that's good and bad because one, it will give me unfiltered opinion and I'm gonna completely trash the drone if it sucks. Let's be real, if you got sent the drone early, you're not gonna say that many bad things because you want DJI to keep sending you drones. And on the other hand of that, the bad thing is I didn't actually have the drone, but I can guarantee you I'm a hardcore cinematic FPV pilot and I'll probably pick up some things that you probably won't. And let's dive into if we should buy this drone now. Let's start with the camera. So I've looked at many different samples and thank the Lord, the camera actually looks good for once. The DJI FPV looked like crap and the DJI Avatar looks a lot better. Honestly, when you compare it to a GoPro 10, I think the GoPro 10 will still reign supreme a little bit, but it's really not that far off. And I think the biggest drawback personally for me is that it doesn't have 5.3K, because 5.3K is really good, especially if you want to crop in social media, you get more pixels to play with, so that's important. But at the same time, it's social media, vertical video, who cares? You can film 4K crop and you'll be able to get away with it. I really prioritize picture quality, and personally for me, the camera is good enough. So if you're really concerned about the camera, you can kind of breathe a sigh of relief because it's definitely good enough in my opinion. It does look a bit sharp, however, which just isn't a really good look for filmmaking, but you might want to do some research to see if you can lower that sharpness, but worst case scenario, I think it's still pretty good. I also forgot to mention, but a huge plus is that you can film 4:3 formats. I doubt you can shoot 4:3 60 FPS. You can definitely shoot 4K 30 FPS. You might have to look that other one up, and you can put it through Gyroflow. Rocksteady is good and all, but you're gonna have to be fairly precise or it will get very wobbly. Nothing like Real Steady Go or just using the GoPro, unfortunately. I think one huge downside though when it comes to the camera is that because you're recording through the same camera for the video and the DVR, if you set auto exposure on the DVR, you're gonna get auto exposure on the actual FPV footage. And I've looked through a bunch of different footage, and when you have auto exposure on, it's extremely sensitive and it kind of looks like shit. I don't know if other people notice, but when watching people's footage, when the auto exposure is on, if you pan down and look at a bit of a darker image, the image quickly turns really unprofessional, which is not ideal. I'm pretty sure you can turn that off, but that also may probably not be ideal because if you, for example, dive down a mountain and you go to an area of darkness and you can't see shit because the auto exposure is not on in your DVR, you're kind of screwed and you really can't make that shot. I'll play a shot that would probably look pretty bad if you use auto exposure on the DJI Avatar, which is a little bit unfortunate, but that's something you're going to have to live with if you buy this drone, which is probably one of its biggest flaws in my opinion. But again, you can kind of work around it. I think really quickly, the GPS features, the fact that you can use it like a Mavic, the fact that you can take photos with the drone, the maneuverability is all up there. You can dive waterfalls, although it is a bit sketchy obviously with the smaller drone, but that's all extremely capable and all just ticks on my list as to why you should buy the drone. Moving really quickly to the bad of the drone, I did mention it already, the auto exposure is a big problem. If you're in nature, you have different lying environments, if you keep it to auto, it's going to look really bad. So if you actually want something fairly cinematic, you're going to have to fly manual settings so the settings don't change in terms of exposure, which may be inconvenient. You might have to like hover midair, change it back so you can see again, and then fly the drone back, which is a bit of a concern for me. Another drawback is the FPV motion control at this stage is still useless. It's just like a fad. They're just trying to push it out. And for the OG FPV pilots, we have a few problems. First of all, the DJI Goggle 3s, they're not even compatible with any of our old drones. So if you buy the new goggles with the drone, sure, you might get like 1080p DVR, except it won't be compatible with any of the current drones, which is kind of problematic. So you're gonna have to keep 2 pairs of goggles, and these things are so expensive, so not a great idea. The second thing that makes me a little bit sad is that this big black box controller is now not compatible with the DJI Avata, which is very unfortunate. Again, if I'm gonna have to buy the drone, I'm gonna have to keep this crap to fly my old air unit drones. And I'm also have to buy the DJI controller with the sticks, which isn't really that expensive, but it is a bit of a shame that you have to buy more crap. So let's quickly talk about the price. The standalone drone is about $650 US, which will probably be around 1,000 Australian dollars. That is fairly expensive. But one thing to keep in mind is if you buy like an iFly bind and fly 5-inch quad, that's going to be around 600, 700 Australian dollars. And then if you buy the GoPro 10, that's at least another $500, all brand new. Having that in mind, that's about like 1.2K. So you could argue just buying a standalone drone is cheaper, but that's for someone who's already got the goggles and everything. So really, it's not that expensive. Obviously, you're not going to want to lose it, but you can say it's slightly cheaper than a GoPro 10 and like a Nazgul, for example. So that brings you to who is this drone for? And a lot of the people who've received the drone has given really positive feedback in this department. But the truth is, I do not think it is ready for beginners. Maybe if you're a really responsible beginner that doesn't really want to go manual and just wants to fly the kind of like sport modes, you do get that FPV look because you're able to like roll and bang turns, not in the manual mode, which I guess if you want fake FPV without knowing how to fly, that's a great idea. But if you actually want to get into manual mode and fly full acro, it's really not for you. I've started as a beginner and I can guarantee you there's about like 5 or 10 different crashes that if this avatar tried to cop those crashes, it would be the end of it. I'd be sad. DJI would probably have to make me buy a new one. I'd have to buy care refresh and it'd be a disaster. However, versus my drone, I just picked it back up and flew again. My drone referring to the iFlight Titan. So in saying that, it's basically for beginners, but not beginners going through full, starting from the bottom to full acro flying, in my opinion. But if you're made of money, you could probably do that too. I do think, however, the drone is actually suited more towards people like me who already know how to fly manual, especially because there's really no product with all the components tied in together, and that is fairly priceless. For example, there's so many times when I'm using the GoPro, I forgot to record, it actually caused me a crash the other day, which is pretty depressing. I'll talk about that in another video. I'm always worried about my drone falling out the sky. The return to home is so dodgy at times, and having that all-in-one package is extremely priceless and could relieve a lot of concerns of flying FPV for me. So just a super quick summary, I do still think the GoPro 10 is more superior because it can have 5.3K and the quality does look a little bit better. However, everything else this drone has really beats today's day and age of FPV. Maybe it's not as maneuverable. It's probably very loud as well, which is something to consider. And the fact that you have that auto exposure is very concerning for me, which is, I guess, the biggest problem in my opinion. So that saves one thing. Will I buy this drone? Honestly, I'm leaning towards a yes, I will buy the drone. I've recently lost my 5-inch. It won't replace that obviously, but I am definitely leaning towards it. And when I actually have it, I'll give you a full in-depth review. Hope you enjoyed the video and I'll catch you in the next one.